Welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation between the authors of the upcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science, now available for pre-order. I'm Kent Anderson here with my co-author Joy Moore, and today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. Hey, Joy.
Hey Kent, how's it going?
It's going okay.
Yeah.
It's in the outline. You're supposed to do awkward psychological standoff. She's not reading the scripts, folks. She's not reading the scripts.
Ah.
We were trying to bake that in and make the opening even more kind of trademarky.
Awkwardly.
Awkward psychological standoff. No, that's what I specialize in those.
Yeah.
So how are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I've had a busy morning. And but I can't complain. The weather is getting better.
Hmm.
I got a bunch of plants I need to plant, so that's what I'm gonna do later today.
I had a crazy thing happen this morning that was kind of cool. So we had freezing rain last night.
Hmm.
Hopefully this is kind of the transition out of full-on winter up here. And so we had freezing rain, and we have a whole bunch of big, huge, tall pine trees around our house, and some birches and all that. So the birches were all bent over by ice, reams on them, and rimmed with ice. And then all the pine trees, all the needles are sparkling in this as the sun rises, right, in the
Hmm.
ice. And then it starts to melt. And it's like this whole rainstorm is going on out in our yard because the pine trees are just raining. And I took a video of it, and it was just super loud rain coming out of the pine trees. It was crazy. So
Wow, but it was just melting ice.
melting ice.
There were no.
Yeah,
Oh, that's really cool.
it was very cool, actually. Nature is cool.
Nature is
And
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've had a beautiful full moon every morning and
Hmm.
every night. I mean, it's amazing. Again, I always reflect on the I always remember that the face of the moon, if it doesn't have light on it, is the color of a cast iron skillet. So for it to be that bright,
Ah.
I mean, it's no wonder the astronauts were like, "Yikes, we need to put our shields down and everything." But it's also just amazing how bright when you have snow on the ground and you've got a full moon, it's like you can get Christmas feelings, and different lines of Christmas carols come to spring to mind and all this stuff. But it's so bright. I mean, you really can,
Hmm.
function.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting also in our neighborhood, a bunch of our neighbors have and ourselves have cut down a lot of trees over
Hmm.
the last year, and it
Right.
has completely changed the way the light comes, but both the moon and the sun.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more of it, I bet.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
totally changed the vibe in the cul-de-sac.
I'm gonna look on Amazon. There's got to be a book called "The Vibe in the Cul-de-Sac."
Oh, that sounds like a good murder mystery.
All right. So, well, we're gonna talk about something not nearly as fun today, and what we want to talk about is the concept of people leveraging trust markers, and us being a little skeptical about why should we trust you. So, are you ready?
Hmm. Yep, let's do it.
All right, so let's talk about why should we trust you? And this kind of came up in between the lines of a few things this week. One was the Bhattacharya interview with the podcast that has that almost that very name. Why should I
Hmm.
trust you, right?
Yeah.
And it was an interview that was not perfect journalistically, but it was very, very revealing nonetheless, because I think Podcast Jay has been on friendly ground
Hmm.
most of the time. And this was ground where he was not treated with kid gloves, and he
Right.
did not fare well. So,
Yeah, and I actually listened to it again this morning, just in prep for this, because the first time around, I thought the interviewers kind of met him where he was on
hmm,
a lot of the questions, which
right.
um, helped him to go further down into the details and to regurgitate a lot of the same rhetoric, rather than zooming out to the big picture of you are ruining, you know, research and public health in
Right,
America.
right.
Or you could the things that you were doing have longer term effects. So he brought them down into the weeds. But when I listened to it again this morning, I realized that they met him there.
Hmm.
And they really poked on a bunch of things. And he did not come out as being somebody who you would want to put your trust in. And a lot of what he was talking about was munged together. And it was
Hmm.
there were a lot of kind of
There's a
mixed
lot going
messages.
on there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like what is the difference between racist science or institutions that are racist and therefore we cut off the science? Like there's like
Right,
he's
or
operating at multiple.
alleging,
Yeah.
alleging a anti-Semitic stance, and but not actually going through the process of engaging with the institution to see if that's the case, or
Mhm.
even taking it fully through, but just passing it off as saying, well, you're anti-Semitic, so we're going to cut off your scientific funding, and that's a whole strange game in and of itself, because you
Hmm.
can cut off Pell Grants, you can cut off funding of other things, you can leave the science grants in place. He could fight for those and say, no, this is very important. We've got patients enrolled in trials, and we can't have interruptions. We're going to lose data. We're going to lose researchers. All of these things. But it just he came off as an accomplice,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
that's
just
very clearly what he is.
punishing the scientists, the individual scientists, by holding their institutions accountable. That's not a good use of taxpayer dollars to fund science.
Right.
And he didn't get into that. And then he was just kind of making up his own definition of what good science is,
Yeah, yeah,
and
it
it's,
makes no sense. I
yeah,
mean, the history of science that would not support that definition. If you did that, you would basically have a faith.
yeah, it was
Where
very,
you would have to you'd have to check in with the priest and say, can I talk about this? Rather than I want some money to go discover something new that might shock the world or change how we approach things. And then he was always, so much of it was about him too,
yeah,
right? They would use you as a casual way of saying, you the administration, you as a representative of the administration, therefore you as an ambassador of the administration, so you did this. And he's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And
oh
it's
yeah,
just
I've only had
it's
this
like
job
such a
for 2 days.
13-year-old
I
debate
didn't.
tactic.
I know you are, but what am I? Kind of crap. Yeah.
So, I wrote a post about it, and it's worth reading, but it kind of got us into this mode of, what's, he's trying to leverage, he's been doing this for a long time, leveraging his MD PhD. So we're supposed to trust him, leveraging HHS, leveraging NIH, leveraging CDC, all these things where the trust is breaking down so much that, the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, and 12 other medical subspecialty societies have said, no, we don't trust them anymore. You can't trust them. Canada is saying you can't trust the US anymore.
Yeah.
Europe is starting to say you can't trust the US anymore. We've got
But
all these things.
he and his, cohorts are the ones who sowed the doubt in the trust in the
Right, to
first
begin
place.
with.
And then
Right.
they built their platform of nobody should trust, our institutions and everyone is sick. And that wasn't the case before he came along. And so now they're building this layer cake on top of it to say, well, no, nobody trusts us, so
Yep.
you're,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
gonna have to trust us.
Well, it's that old lesson about lying, right? So they started with a lie,
Yeah.
and now they're having to lie again and again and again and again. And now they're having to sneak in some truth, because I just saw Bhattacharya said, oh, everybody should get their measles vaccines, because now that they've got the consequences of measles outbreaks and all this stuff. So yeah, they're bad news. But then we also had an announcement from Wiley about a
Hmm.
new partnership with OpenEvidence. And we've been poking at OpenEvidence, and I wouldn't trust it myself. And Wiley's, the announcement is unusual, not really for Wiley, because they've been kind of enamored with tech more than science and scholarship for a long time. as a
Hmm.
company. They've been, from
Yeah,
pursuing
early
Adapon
adopters
and,
of, well, but also the earliest, I think, in a big way, adopters of licensing their content to
hmm
AI
hmm
products.
right. But I mean, they've been a fast follower. They bought Hindawi, right? They invested in
Hmm.
that. They got burned with that. They bought Adapon, So they every time there seems to be a something new to do, they don't. It's like they don't trust their core business, right?
Hmm.
They want to do. They want to be something else, right? They have an identity crisis, and so they're trying now. They're trying on AI and to see if that is more comfortable for them at this point.
Hmm.
And they haven't said anything about. They're the only large U.S. publisher in the big picture of the big commercial companies. They're the only one. They've been completely silent about the MAHA movement and the U.S. government cutting science funding. So that's another thing that registers with me as far as can we trust Wiley to defend their core business, which is supposed to be about vetting scholarship in science, right?
Hmm.
So, it's not, it's back when I was a youngin in this area, John Wiley and Sons was kind of the vaunted company, I mean, they had an ampersand in their name, for God's sake. He had sons, but it's now it's just Wiley, and I think this announcement is just more of the same, where they're just uncomfortable with the space that I would say, should occupy, and they're trying on new guys for the company.
Yeah.
So,
So the announcement is that they are joining up with OpenEvidence
right.
and they are licensing content into that platform alongside with JAMA and Nijam and others who have
hmm
become, to be sure, OpenEvidence scrapes everything that they can get, but they
Right.
do have some identified sponsor partners,
Right. Branded partners.
branded partners.
And so they put the Cochrane collaboration.
Yeah, so that was the gist of the announcement. Is now Open Evidence is going to have Cochrane content, and so
hmm
therefore it's going to be better evidence, and that is patently ridiculous, um, because Cochrane a Cochrane content is available for anybody who wants to get it, and you have to be qualified in order to know how to read it.
hmm
It is not purpose built for making recommendations for individual patients at the point of care.
Right.
And second, it's not going to blend well with all the other stuff that's in there.
hmm
It's going to be more confusing. And it's
That's
making me
enough.
nuts.
Yeah. Well, but this is the game, right? So the one of the people from Wiley said that, open evidence was built on a principle their founders call gold in, gold out. And that's been one of the big things that NEJM has said, and I think JAM has said it too, was that, with the best evidence,
Hmm.
open evidence will be better than anything else. And that's given how LLMs work, and also how, like you said, open evidence is scraping everything
Hmm.
willy-nilly. I mean, there's so much MDPI and frontiers and you name it in there, that any gold is being completely washed out.
Hmm.
And as far as high quality content, it's completely flooded away. And and then you've got a whole bunch of fool's gold. So you've got all this pyrite in there. And then I always also took it as gold out, as, yeah, they are there to make money. Open
Right.
evidence is there. It's like, we'll take your
Yeah.
highly refined content and your super high brand equity names, and we'll put them in our system, and we'll pull a lever, and money will fall into our hands.
I'm
Thank you
thinking
very much.
I'm thinking of Scrooge McDuck doing the backstroke in his swimming pool full
Exactly.
of coins. It's like,
Yeah.
no, if you want the best evidence, then just go to Cochrane,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like,
Or
or,
one where
or
you can actually read stable
or go to
evidence.
something that's been distilled. If
Yeah.
if you're in a if you're in a specialty and you need to find a guideline that's going to help inform your practice, then you should know where to go find that.
Right.
You don't need to go to a single source. And then
Right.
not to mention the purpose-built point of care products that distill it for users.
Right. Yeah. And so, I've talked about how, you can get, misinformation out of open evidence about colostrum, being 90% of it's commercially placed.
Hmm.
IQ and fluoride is, bad OA article. Golf courses and pesticides. Functional medicine is, basically shilling for, those people. And, so there are all these things going on. And then there's also a recent preprint that talked about how a group did, and it's an archive preprint, and it's computer science, so I'm comfortable talking about it.
Hmm.
It's not biomedicine, but they talk about unmodified LLM behavior, suppressed discovery, and inflated confidence, comparably to explicitly sycophantic prompting. By contrast, unbiased sampling from the true distribution yielded discovery rates 5 times higher. These results reveal how sycophantic AI distorts belief, manufacturing certainty where there should be doubt. And I think that's a really important point that from an epistemic point of view, one of the first things you and I noticed about open evidence was how confident it was.
Hmm.
It had one study, and it would be like, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you've asked
Because
about has an answer, and I shall provide it. And nonsense. It's really
hmm
complicated, and that's what science is. But this. So we'll talk about the business model in a minute. But keep in mind that this sycophancy is part of the attention economy,
hmm
right? You want people to engage with your content, and all these LLMs have now years worth of evidence that they will, butter you up
hmm
to keep you using it. So you
Yep.
fall in love with it, basically.
Yep. It's the computer says yes. And I
That's
asked you
right.
the other day if you were familiar with Little Britain's Carol, who says computer says no. And some of you out there might know of that. That was from a long time ago, but it has switched. It used to be that the computers were kind of gatekeepers, and whatever data was in there was whatever you could deal with. And now it's totally flipped. Is they're like, come on, yes, and
Right.
you
Right. It's
got this.
improv.
Yeah,
Improv and
you got this.
sycophancy. So one of the things that the about sycophancy is so there's hallucinations, which the whole thing's a hallucination, but those are falsehoods.
Hmm.
Sycophancy is a bias in the selection of the data people see. When AI systems are trained to be helpful, they may inadvertently prioritize data that validates the user's narrative over data that gets them closer to the truth. And Gary Marcus boiled it down and said, want to feel good about yourself? Use a chatbot. Want to find
Right.
truth? Go elsewhere. And there are all these things, like you have model drift, you have mistakes, you have unreliability. In the post that goes with this, I'll have some examples of how I asked OpenEvidence the same question on 2 different browsers, and it gave me uh, answers that were different enough that it definitely was not the same paragraph out of a textbook, right?
Wow. So that means if there were, two physicians asking the same question,
Hmm.
it would give them potentially two different
Yeah.
answers.
And I've gotten emails from people who, this was one browser on one computer from one IP address. I've
Uh-huh.
gotten emails from people who are on different networks, and who knows what kind of computer they're using or browser. But they read a post about open evidence, and they put in the same query that I screen grabbed, and they got a completely different answer. I mean,
Mm.
totally different. And so this is, so you don't know how wildly the sycophancy swings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you do have it does keep track of your, with cookies and everything else of your prior queries. So it's kind of taking those into account, and we'll talk again about the business model in a second. But there's a reason it's doing that because it wants to target you,
Yeah.
even at a fundamental LLM level, in order to be your best buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because I don't think, any, I just don't, I think that's gross and weird, and it creeps me out.
Well,
It's like, why are you telling me the truth? Or are you telling me what I want to hear?
well, that's just wrong. When you're talking about medical information, there's no
Right,
room for that, you know. I mean, I
right.
guess it worked, you know, like we talked about last week with Bob and Tom, who decided to endorse open evidence because they thought it was smarter than they were. Um, but no, that's so alarming.
Hmm.
And like you said, we'll get into the business model and why it's alarming, but it's not surprising because it makes total sense.
Yes. And then one last thing you and I came across this morning, thanks to Retraction Watch, which I've written about, can LLMs retract articles? And even more fundamentally, can they register a correction properly? Because the way we often present corrections is for humans. It's like there's been a correction to this article, and you can find the correction here. And then we'll say table 4, column 3, the data in this is actually this and not this.
Hmm.
And an LLM, if they can process all of that into a correction, good for it. But I need evidence that it can do that because it's kind of hard to do. But there's 123 corrections were issued to a journal called Pediatrics and Child Health. It's a Canadian pediatrics journal, which had published a mix of fictional and real clinical vignettes for more than 20 years. And one of them was used by a fraudster who had put something into the Lancet about opioids being transferred to a baby through breast milk.
Hmm.
And all the evidence seems to point to the fact that the baby was probably poisoned by a crushed up pill in a little bit of breast milk that the baby ate directly, and it just gave him all this stuff. But the pediatrician at the heart of this seems to have been, there's a whole sordid story, and there'll be a link in the post about this to a great New Yorker article that just came out recently last month about it.
Hmm.
But if so there's this huge list of corrections. They all point to all these things. Some of the vignettes were based on true stories. Some were like this one, maybe covering up a murder. And both OpenEvidence and ChatGPT still today, even though it's a month after this exposure and since the retractions and all these other things have gone on, and all this discussion and letters and all this stuff, both of them are using this fictional case to explain how infants can die from opioids received via breast milk, even though it's physiologically implausible and it's based
Hmm.
on a fictional account. So this is just, these things happen once in a while. And Richard Horton was quoted in the New Yorker piece as saying, much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. And I
Hmm.
think, in a normal Horton way, he's a little bit too absolute about it. But but conceptually, directionally, he's right. A
Hmm.
lot of it is preliminary
Yeah.
or initial or yet won't bear out.
Hmm.
And so to base a system like this on the latest articles, and they do highlight in OpenEvidence, this is new. And it's like,
Right.
ooh,
That's
careful with
not
that one.
good. That's worse.
Yeah.
And that is also echoed in the interview with Jay Bhattacharya, where he has a bias towards new researchers and new ideas, and he
Hmm.
only wants to fund new things. He doesn't want to keep throwing money at something that people have been studying for like 7, 8 whole years, you know?
Yeah, no kidding. He's such a jerk. So yeah, but that's also part of him flipping the pond on established science, right? I mean, there's an
Right.
agenda to that, right?
But these two things go together. The
Hmm.
bias towards new, cutting edge, the latest and greatest, is anathema to how evidence-based medicine actually comes into the workflow, into the common practice of clinicians.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, open evidence prioritizing this is new and great. That's not good.
Well, but I think, well, so let's pivot into their business model because I
Hmm.
think it plays into their business model,
Hmm.
which is user targeted ads,
Yeah.
right? And so they are, not UpToDate, Dynamed, clinical key, other services like this, EHRs, institutions are paying to put those in front of their healthcare workers, their physicians, their
Mm-hmm.
nurses, their, whoever, paramedics. And they, because of that, they're paid for. They don't run ads. And they are working hard to keep those subscription dollars coming by being trustworthy and useful. And I'm sure they do a ton of market research and they get a lot of feedback. And we looked at Wolters Kluwer's annual report, and they, were very proud that their renewal rate for UpToDate was holding steady, and all of
Mm-hmm.
these things. They worry about the fact whether there's use worth paying for, right?
Mm-hmm. And they have huge editorial teams
Hmm.
that have, been built up over decades. They have their custom workflows for how to read the primary research and to follow it through guidelines and to consult with Cochrane and see what's going on in those databases. It takes a lot of people to to distill information from the primary literature all the way through the different pathways of experts and committees and people who are doing the statistical analysis to come up with a recommendation that's going to become a topic in one of these databases that
Hmm.
are part of a clinician's workflow.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the there's, I'm sure there are usage metrics and all sorts of other things, but ultimately the value is, does this, and there are all sorts of integrations they have and things like that. So these aren't going to be easily displaced, but here you have basically the way I interpret their business model is this is the Facebook of of the medical literature, storming in, trying to take ads,
Mm-hmm.
trying to earn a whole bunch of money through ads. And it's bringing the attention economy into point of care tools. It's bringing the targeted advertising model into point of care tools. And it's trying to steal ad dollars and commercial attention. And this model has not been has not had a salutary effect on, on knowledge, truth, or anything else. But it also kind of reveals, like I'm pretty sure they've heard about our interrogations of their systems,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't care.
No, they don't.
No.
That's not what it's about. And so we can keep, poking and nerding out on, well, this result isn't quite right or things like
Hmm.
that. But when you look at how they're making their money and or how they're hoping to make money,
Right.
how
Right.
they're persuading new partners to come on board and endorse them, it's just capturing eyeballs and NPIs
Hmm.
and for an advertising play.
Yep.
And it's not so the content, the results that they deliver are not important in their business model.
No.
That's just
Just that
what
they deliver them.
that's whatever the user is going to take away from it. What they are capturing are the prompts. What is
Hmm.
the user asking? Who
Hmm.
is that user? Therefore, now I know something about you, Dr. Kent
And I
Anderson,
can serve an
and I can
ad.
serve an ad to you. Whatever
Right.
happens after that doesn't matter.
And
It's
well, and I
not
can
their
also give
problem.
my partners those prompts and make them feel smarter and
Hmm.
connected to their audience, and
Hmm.
everybody's happy. So those prompts are really, really critical, and I'm sure that's what they're dealing in a lot. You know, the content store is, it invites sycophancy. It also invites delay because one of the things that they're having to do is the way the ad model works is when you enter a query or a prompt, the ad renders while that's processed. So
Hmm.
there's an incentive in the system too to make that processing last at least a certain minimum amount of time.
Oh, because it's thinking so
Well,
hard
it's
about
thinking,
your important question.
And so before it collapses, it's got to think at least 10 seconds, I'm sure. There's probably a minimum, and maybe you can even pay more to get that thinking up to 15 seconds. Or who
Mm.
knows? We don't know. But these targeted ads are high priced. It also this has been a long time coming, and I texted you earlier about remember Sermo and
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah, I
things.
worked with them.
Yeah, but the one of the things that digital advertising did, and all the people working in advertising before and after noticed this change, is it made it quantifiable in a
Hmm.
way that also made it like nobody really needs to care. And so all the agency people now are very focused on just numbers. They just
Hmm.
want number go up, number reach this threshold. They've got their internal metrics, and they actually don't engage with brands anymore. They don't engage with, they don't want to be in the best venue. They don't want to be in the top journal. They don't want to be with the, best audience. They just want number.
Yeah, they're purchasing via spreadsheets,
Yep.
and not via, brand trust and other markers.
Right. But
Or
open
even
evidence,
even the qualified audience, right? That whole
right.
concept has kind of gone away. It's like if especially if you're collecting NPIs, then you're qualified, right?
Well, yeah, because the data now is so rich behind the scenes that you don't need
Hmm.
to have a journal qualifying your audience. You can just buy that list, and you get all
Hmm.
sorts of variables about that person, and privacy is gone. But what's interesting is these brands, NEJM, JAMA, their ad businesses are slowly eroding and collapsing, and they're getting in bed with open evidence. And it just reminds me, so it's the Facebook of medical information, right? And it
Hmm.
reminds me of when all of these news organizations were like, well, Facebook will help us be even,
Yeah.
more prominent, and or it's the only thing we see, we have to do it. There's just no choice. They've got a gun to our head, whatever it is,
Hmm.
right? And this feels like, that this is history repeating itself, right? These open evidence wants to come in, steal their lunch money, get their clothes dirty,
Yeah.
and move on and go bully somebody else into coughing up their brand equity.
Hmm.
So and audience,
Yeah.
and that's kind of sad to see that everybody's playing along. It's like you could have said no.
Well, yeah.
You could have said, no, we're not going to let you crawl our content, and you're going to have to make your way some other, But the top brands are now just like, yeah, come steal our lunch money,
Hmm.
come, scuff us up,
Yeah.
make us look
Well,
bad. That's fine.
I'm sure they're stealing their lunch money and promising them, dividends on the back end someday. Ha
That's
ha.
right. And
Good
we'll
luck.
take you. Yeah, we'll be
And then we'll
best
take you out
friends
to
after
dinner.
this. We'll be,
Right.
this is how we make friends. First, I beat you up and steal your lunch money, and then, I'll like you later. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll leave you alone for a week. But so they're stealing ad dollars, they're stealing commercial attention. You have a system that has incentives in it to further develop sycophancy, to throw anything at not really care about the quality of the information, and it's just the OG bad internet business model come to medical information. The other thing that struck me is they probably can't care that much about the content because someday Section 230 is going to come into this whole mix, right?
Yeah, because then they're going to be like, it's not our content.
That's right. We just have an AI, and the AI does this, and
Yeah.
it's like no accountability.
There's no accountability. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not fans, but
Still
watch
not
out.
fans. We keep looking and it's getting worse. That's all I have
Yeah,
to say.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just how can you let something like this come into science? I just don't understand the infatuation with technology. But a lot of the people we've talked to have been like, these people don't understand technology who are making the deals. They think it's still cool. And this gets back to the Bob Wachter thing and Tom
Hmm.
Frieden and all that. They still think it's cool. They're dinosaurs who,
Hmm.
are still roaring about the late 90s, and computers are great. And it's like, no, you haven't seen what they've done to science and society. the people who are decimating the U.S. science are creatures of the internet, and now they're bringing AI tools to desktops that
Hmm.
doctors near and dear to you might be using, and a business model that is known to corrupt information sources. So,
Yeah, and it goes back to one of the things we talked about last week, how, the introduction of digital tools was to support science, and now scientific content is supporting the digital platforms. And
mhm.
in the last week, seeing, Wiley and the Concord content joining OpenEvidence, and learning more about OpenEvidence's business model is just further reinforcing that this content is not there to provide answers. It's to provide information for them to monetize.
Yep, gold in, gold out.
Just not the way you thought it
It's not the
was.
same thing on either. You just
No, it's
interpret that as you
bifurcated,
will.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
the gold in and
Best content in, and we're going to take our money and run. Yeah.
right.
All right. So, well, let's go on to discoveries of the week
All
and
right.
wrap up there.
Sounds good.
All right, discoveries of the week. So I'm going to go first this week. If you hadn't noticed, we're now switching, so we actually have an order, and so we don't have to negotiate it. Or I don't. I think I was sticking you with starting out too many times. I was like, Joy, you go first. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fine.
but hey, I'll go first. So
Yeah,
yeah, this is my
I'm
turn.
curious about this one.
Yeah, so I've heard about this before, but it's a reminder, and it's a good seasonal reminder that this is the season of Dutch fish doorbells.
Okay.
Three words that you haven't really contemplated as going together.
Ooh, that would be great in the New York Times connections game that we were talking about
Yeah,
before.
there you
Things
go.
that you
Dutch
didn't know
fish
go to.
doorbells. They
Yeah.
go together. So what this is so they have in the Netherlands, they have all these locks and canals and everything. In the winter, they close them down because there aren't that many ships or boats traversing them, and so they and to keep with the rough seas and all this stuff, they close them down. But as spring approaches, the fish start to want to go and spawn,
Hmm.
and they didn't know, and it's really takes somebody to actually go and turn a big crank wheel to open the gates. They're actually gatekeepers, and they didn't know when to do that, so they installed all these little cameras by the gates and made them internet enabled so that people can watch. And if there are a bunch of little fish coming in to by a gate, they ring the users can go like ring 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 the doorbell, and the appropriate gatekeeper goes, oh, I got to go open the gates for the fish, and it lets them
Oh,
through. And it's turned into this big thing. And I looked at it earlier today, and it's like the site was so busy with all these
that is
Dutch
so
people
cool.
watching the
So
fish.
the Oh, I thought the fish were ringing the doorbell, but it's the people watching the fish that are ringing
Yep,
the doorbell. That
yep.
is so cool.
Isn't that great? That's good use of tech for
Yeah,
science
yeah.
and just being nice.
Hello, these fish are ready to go. Open the gate.
That's right. Give them a stroopwafel and let them go spawn. So anyhow, there'll be a link in the show notes. It's a really nice Scientific American article. But every spring, there's this whole thing of in the Netherlands of everybody ringing the fish doorbells. So there you go.
Oh, I wonder, there's this really good comedian that I've seen online, and I think his handle is Double Dutch,
Mm.
and he impersonates Dutch people, and I don't. He's English, living in the Netherlands, but he does that, you know, uh, discovering what it's like to deal with different cultures,
Mm.
and he's pretty funny.
Then maybe we'll have to put a
I'll have
link
to
to
see.
the
It
show
says,
notes then.
yes, it's time to open the door for the
Time to
fish.
open the gate for the fish. All right, what's yours?
Well, I didn't. I was thinking about that this morning. I didn't discover anything totally mind blowing. But I did discover a couple of little things.
Mm-hmm.
And this just kind of like on a day-to-day basis, um, reminding me how satisfying and interesting it can be just talking to strangers,
Mm.
whether I'm at the dog park or in the grocery store or pickleball, wherever. So I learned a couple things just by,
Okay.
random conversations. So A guy I know, I see from time to time at the dog park, turns out he keeps bees in his backyard
Oh, nice.
here in town,
Yeah.
just two hives. But he was telling me this morning that he can tell that spring is coming by the activity within the hive, like whether
Hmm.
this is just a warm, front, or if it's
Right.
really because
Enduring.
the bees know what they're doing.
They're not
Uh,
messing around. They're like, I'm not waking up until I actually
yeah.
need to get out to work.
Yeah. So much for Puxatawny Phil. If you want to know whether it's spring, ask
Right.
a
Ask the busy
beekeeper.
bee.
Yeah. And then another discovery I had yesterday, and this was at pickleball, and I was playing with a woman I hadn't met before, and we were just chit-chatting, and it turns out that like 20 years ago, she was basically my next door neighbor in Massachusetts.
You're kidding. That's a small world. I love small world stories, so
Yeah.
that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, we maybe we knew each other back in the day, maybe
Like
we
same
didn't.
street and
Yeah.
everything.
One street behind. So
Okay.
literally, but it's like behind. So
Okay.
yeah. And it was like, huh, that's crazy.
I love small world stuff. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, there are assholes everywhere.
Yep. I love them. I love them.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our friends at Provoke the Truth for the music. If you have topics you want us to cover, and by the way, I will note that part of the reason we covered this is because we had people asking us to cover it.
Yes.
So this does work. So, but please
Mm-hmm.
email us at disruptedscience@gmail.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn with our profiles. However you want to contact us, we're more than happy to hear from you. And you can also keep up with developments at the Geyser, where you can subscribe to support our efforts. And thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.